For decades, Israel lived with a problem no amount of strategy could fix. It wasn't the wars, the politics, or even the geography. It was the fact that the country sat in the center of the Middle East, one of the richest energy regions in the world, yet somehow ended up with none of it. Everyone around them had oceans of oil and gas beneath their feet. Israel had sand, stone, and scorching heat. Their entire economy depended on imported fuel, and in a region built on rivalries. Depending on others for electricity was like playing a game where one wrong move meant the lights could go out. Golda Meir, the former prime minister, put it perfectly when she joked that Moses dragged them through the desert for 40 years just to bring them to the one spot in the Middle East with no oil. But here's the thing, it wasn't really a joke. It was their reality, and it was terrifying. Every drop of power had to be imported. Every liter of fuel came from somewhere else. In a region where your neighbors would love nothing more than to see you fail, depending on them for energy is like handing them a loaded weapon. One blockade, one sanction, one political move, and the entire nation goes dark. But then something impossible happened. In just 15 years, Israel pulled off what might be the most insane infrastructure transformation in modern history. They discovered a massive energy reserve that geologists swore didn't exist. They built offshore platforms that needed defending like military bases. They carved tunnels through sacred mountains for a high-speed railway. They opened their ports to China, which sparked an actual spy war with the United States. And they even tried to engineer a way to stop the Dead Sea from completely disappearing. This is the story of how 30 billion and sheer force of will completely reshaped the power balance of the Middle East. The whole thing started in 2010 with a discovery that shouldn't have been possible. Deep seismic scans picked up something strange under the Mediterranean seabed, a massive anomaly that made no sense according to everything geologists thought they knew about the region. They decided to drill anyway, and what they found changed everything: Leviathan. Not the biblical monster, but close enough. This gas field contained over 600 billion cubic meters of natural gas, enough to power the entire nation for 4 decades. Suddenly, Israel wasn't energy poor anymore. But here's where it gets crazy. Finding the gas was actually the easy part. The field sat 130 kilometers offshore, buried under 1,500 meters of water, and then several more kilometers of solid rock below that. Getting to it required building what can only be described as a fortress at sea. The Leviathan platform is an engineering marvel that most people will never see. It's not floating, it's pinned to the ocean floor by massive steel legs, and the platform itself weighs 25,000 tons. That's the weight of 3 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other. And because Israel couldn't build something that massive domestically, they had it fabricated in Texas, on the other side of the planet. Imagine loading 3 Eiffel Towers onto the world's largest barges, sailing them across the Atlantic, through the Strait of Gibraltar, and across the Mediterranean. Then picture the Sleipnir, the largest crane vessel on Earth, lifting that 25,000-ton deck and lowering it onto those steel legs with millimeter-level precision while fighting ocean swells. One mistake, one miscalculation, and billions of dollars sink to the bottom. The platform began production in December 2019. But there's something unique about this rig that most offshore platforms don't have: a navy. Because this platform literally powers the entire country, it's a prime target. Israeli warships equipped with naval Iron Dome systems constantly patrol the area, and those threats aren't theoretical. Before his elimination, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah released a video showing the exact coordinates of the Leviathan platform, complete with photos that looked like they were taken from reconnaissance drones. Reports suggest Hezbollah possesses between 120,000 and 200,000 rockets, many capable of reaching these platforms. Just this year, Chevron suspended the Leviathan expansion project for 6 months due to escalating security threats. This isn't just infrastructure, it's a military asset that needs defending every single day. But that wasn't the end of the controversy. While Israel was conquering the sea, they made a decision on land that would spark an international incident. The port of Haifa needed an upgrade desperately. The old facility couldn't handle the new generation of mega container ships, and without it, Israel's economy would suffer. So they opened a tender for companies to build and operate a new terminal. The winner? China. Specifically, SIPG, a state-owned Chinese company. From an engineering perspective, it was brilliant. They brought in automated cranes, dredged the harbor to 17 meters deep, and installed cutting-edge logistics systems. The port could suddenly handle the biggest ships on the planet. Israel's trade capacity exploded overnight. But the US Navy lost its mind. The Sixth Fleet regularly docks at Haifa, and now there was a Chinese-operated port sitting meters away from American warships. The concern wasn't just theoretical. It was about surveillance capabilities, potential espionage, and what happens when a foreign power controls critical infrastructure right next to your military assets. Israel had to write special override clauses into the contract that would allow them to instantly seize control of the port in any emergency. It forced Israeli officials into this impossible diplomatic dance, trying to keep both the Americans happy while benefiting from Chinese investment and technology. And despite all the tension and warnings, the port kept expanding. It's a reminder that in the world of massive infrastructure projects, a port is never just a port. It's a foothold, a statement, and potentially a weapon. But Israel wasn't done reshaping its landscape. They faced another challenge that seemed impossible: connecting coastal Tel Aviv to mountain Jerusalem with high-speed rail. The problem was brutal. Jerusalem sits high in the mountains, and the terrain between the cities is rugged and steep. Going over the mountains would make high-speed rail impossible. So they made the only choice that made sense: they'd go through them. Engineers deployed massive tunnel boring machines and carved 38 kilometers of tunnels through solid rock. They built Israel's longest bridge, stretching 1.2 kilometers. The entire project cost $7 billion for just 57 kilometers of track. But the craziest part is where the train ends up. When you step off at Jerusalem's Yitzhak Navon station, you're standing 80 meters underground, making it one of the deepest heavy rail stations in the world. Why build it so deep? Officially, it's for engineering reasons, to slip the tracks under existing buildings and infrastructure. But here's what they don't advertise in the tourist brochures. The station was designed to function as a massive nuclear-proof bunker. It can shelter 2,000 people during a conflict. The ventilation systems can filter out chemical weapons. It's not just a train station, it's a survival shelter disguised as infrastructure. The line opened in 2018 and became fully operational in 2019, cutting travel time between the cities to just 28 minutes. And plans are already in motion to extend it deeper into Jerusalem's city center with 2 additional underground stations. Energy secured, trade routes expanded, transportation revolutionized. Israel was checking boxes at an incredible pace. But there was one project that represented both their ambition and their limitations: the Red Sea to Dead Sea Canal. The Dead Sea is disappearing. Every year, the water level drops more than a meter. Sinkholes are swallowing roads and buildings. What was once a thriving tourist destination is literally vanishing before everyone's eyes, all because water from the Jordan River that used to feed it has been diverted for other uses. The proposed solution was staggering in its scale: build a 180-kilometer pipeline from the Red Sea, pump water across the desert through both Jordan and Israel, and dump it into the Dead Sea. On paper, it was perfect. They could even build desalination plants along the way to provide drinking water. It was a win for everyone, or so they thought. Then the scientists ran the numbers and discovered a nightmare. The sulfate-rich water from the Red Sea and the calcium-rich water of the Dead Sea don't mix well. Combine them, and you create gypsum. The beautiful, clear blue Dead Sea could turn milky white. Even worse, it could trigger massive blooms of red algae that would destroy what little ecosystem remains. Add in the political complications, because nothing in the Middle East is ever just about engineering, and the project stalled. Jordan pulled the plug in 2021, citing a lack of genuine Israeli commitment. The estimated cost had ballooned past $10 billion, and nobody wanted to be responsible for accidentally destroying one of the world's natural wonders. It remains on paper, a grand vision trapped between chemistry, politics, and environmental risk. Some recent reports suggest Israel is now considering an alternative route from the Mediterranean instead, but nothing's been confirmed. For now, the Dead Sea continues to shrink while engineers and politicians argue over solutions. So why spend $30 billion on all of this? What was the end game? The answer becomes clear when you look at what happened next. Because of the gas from Leviathan, Israel developed a massive petrochemical industry in Ashkelon. They're converting natural gas into plastic polymers and exporting $2 billion worth of materials every year. But that's not the real prize. The real transformation came from gas diplomacy, and it's reshaping the entire region. Israel is now exporting gas to its former enemies, Egypt and Jordan. Think about the history here. These nations were at war for decades. People died, families were destroyed, and now their power grids are physically connected through pipelines. Jordan's electricity stays on because of Israeli gas. Egypt's LNG terminals process Israeli gas and send it to Europe. And the numbers are staggering. Despite the ongoing conflict in Gaza, Israel's gas exports to Egypt and Jordan increased by more than 13% in 2024. They exported 13.11 billion cubic meters, even while missiles were flying. State revenues from gas royalties hit NIS 2.37 billion in 2024 alone. But the deal that really proves how much has changed came in August 2025. Israel and Egypt signed a $35 billion agreement to supply 130 billion cubic meters of natural gas through 2040. It's the largest export deal in Israel's entire history. The first phase starts in 2026, with Egypt buying 20 billion cubic meters. The second phase, beginning in 2029, will supply another 110 billion cubic meters after Leviathan completes its expansion. Israeli gas now accounts for 15 to 20% of Egypt's total consumption. Some reports suggest that percentage could climb even higher, making Egypt heavily dependent on Israeli energy. This is what they call infrastructure peace. It's the idea that if you're trading billions of dollars in energy, you're less likely to fire missiles at each other. When your lights, your hospitals, your entire economy depends on pipelines crossing borders, war becomes exponentially more costly. It's a web of interdependence built from concrete, steel, and natural gas. And remarkably, it's held during one of the most volatile periods in the region's recent history. Even during the intense fighting in 2023 and 2024, the gas kept flowing. Tankers kept loading. Money kept changing hands. The infrastructure created incentives stronger than decades of hatred. But let's be real about what all of this means. Israel's transformation from energy poverty to energy exporter in less than a generation is extraordinary. They engineered themselves out of an existential crisis through sheer determination and massive investment. They turned scarcity into surplus and vulnerability into leverage. But grand structures are never just about the engineering. Every rail line sparked disputes over sacred land. The port created a superpower rivalry that still simmers beneath the surface. The gas platforms require constant military protection from very real threats. And the Dead Sea Canal, the most ambitious project of all, remains nothing more than blueprints and broken promises, a victim of chemistry and politics that nobody's figured out how to solve. These projects prove something important. You can absolutely build your way to power. Infrastructure can reshape economies, forge unlikely alliances, and change the strategic calculus of an entire region. But they also remind us that in the Middle East, nothing exists in isolation. Every pipe is a potential target. Every railway cuts through contested land. Every port is a chess piece in a game between superpowers. Every cubic meter of gas represents both an opportunity and a vulnerability. Israel built a $30 billion machine to escape scarcity, and in the process, they created a new kind of interdependence that's being tested every single day. So, here's the question we're thinking about. Is infrastructure peace a real possibility, or just a temporary arrangement that falls apart the moment the shooting starts? Can concrete and pipelines really replace centuries of conflict? And was the environmental risk of projects like the Dead Sea Canal worth pursuing, or are some problems better left unsolved? The Middle East has always been a place where geology, politics, and war intersect in ways that are impossible to untangle. Israel's grand structures are the latest move on that chessboard, and nobody knows yet whether they've secured the nation's future or just created more pieces for someone else to capture.